Hi, I'm Doug Young, and I'd like to introduce my book, Hymns for Fingerstyle Guitar. This book is a little different than others I've done, so I'd like to explain and demonstrate how it's meant to work. I created the 25 arrangements in this book for my own use, and what I was going for was a collection of hymns that I could pick up and sight read if I was asked to play a hymn, and that I could embellish on the fly to extend the arrangement. Rather than creating complex multi-page arrangements, these hymns are all designed to not require any page turning. Most fit on one page. I didn't write out introductions, endings, or variations. Instead, I created simple one-verse arrangements that I could sight read and then extend during a performance. For each hymn in the book, there's also an accompanying page that suggests multiple ways to enhance the basic arrangement, and I'm going to talk about some of these approaches using the hymn Be Thou My Vision as an example in this video. I've also recorded all of the hymns so that you can listen to those for inspiration. If you're familiar with the idea of a jazz fake book, where you have the outline of what you need to play, but not every single note, this is along those lines conceptually, but it's a fingerstyle fake book, where I did write out all the fingerstyle voices and the chords in both standard notation and tablature, but I made them as minimal as I could while still producing a musical arrangement. The opening performance of Be Thou My Vision that I just played is an example of how I use this book. I improvised the introduction, I played one verse exactly as written, and then I repeated it with some improvised variations, using the written version of the book as a guide while I was playing. And then I finally improvised an ending. So let me demonstrate how that works using the same hymn. Let's start by playing Be Thou My Vision exactly as written. I'll just play the first 4 bars. So here's how it's written in the book. So that's perfectly fine to play exactly as written, but I can also take some liberties with it. It's easy enough to read this, either the tablature or the standard notation, as long as you can read that comfortably. You can play around with the timing, with adding additional notes. I've designed it so that you mostly are holding down common chord shapes while we're playing the melody, and you can pretty freely add additional notes. So let me try a couple variations, show you what I mean. Just very simply adding in a few notes here and there. Let me experiment with the timing a little bit. I'll try to anticipate a few notes and just sort of play with the timing a little bit like you would if you were singing a solo performance of the tune. I could try to introduce even more movement underneath the melody. I could try to add some arpeggios around the chord shapes. Let me give that a shot. And so on. So I'm actually reading what's written here, but I'm just feeling free to sort of play around with the ideas and add things. And so I can create as many variations as I need to create while I'm working through the tune. And I can play as many verses as I want, playing them differently each time, just by doing whatever I feel at the moment. Let's talk about introductions and endings for a minute. As I mentioned, I haven't written specific intros or endings in the book, but throughout the book I do give suggestions, both general ideas at the beginning of the book and usually suggestions in each piece for what might make a good introduction or what might make a good ending. And in some cases I wrote out in the side notes that accompany each tune some of the things that I improvised on the recordings that come with the book. So let's talk about how we could add an intro to Be Thou My Vision. There are lots of things we could do. In fact, we could just skip the intro and just start playing a song. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's also fairly safe to just play some picking pattern over the 1, 4, and 5 chords to set up a tune. You just want to establish the tempo and the feel and at least sort of set up and make it sound like you're about to start the song. Be Thou My Vision is in G, so I could play something using G, C, and D. Maybe something like this. And then we start into the song. What I did on the performance at the beginning of this video was something based on C, G, and D, but I tried to do something a little bit different. I recognized that I can play a G chord using harmonics right here on the middle 3 strings, 4th, 3rd, and 2nd strings. That's a G. I could play a C, C major 7th, with one finger just by playing the 8th fret 6th string and the top 3 strings open. And I've got a D chord in harmonics on the 7th fret. So I just played a picking pattern based around those things, playing C, G, C, and then D. It was something like that. I made that up on the fly, and I'll do something different every time. But I can have that core of an idea and play around with it. So let's talk about some approaches you can use for an ending. These are all tools that you can have available and sort of choose to use on the fly when you're performing a tune. Now, the easiest thing for an ending is just to retard into the final note. That should always work. You could also just sort of extend a song with some additional chords. Again, the 1, 4, and 5 chords work well. Just sort of play some patterns until that winds it down to an ending. These are hymns, so you could use what's called a plagal cadence, or more simply, an amen ending. To do that, you just play the 4 chord followed by the 1 chord. So if I was ending the song, I would end on a G, and then play. And that sounds like an appropriate ending for a hymn. What I did on the opening performance was something that's often called a tag ending. The song ends on a G major, but I changed that to an E minor, which is the relative minor of G. That creates a little surprise. It's not what you expect to hear, so it kind of says what's coming next. Then I repeated the final phrase and retarded to the end. So I'm playing the last line. The E minor just sort of feels like some suspense there because I hit the wrong chord, basically. Then repeat. So I've used the word improvising here a number of times, and I want to be clear about what I mean when I'm talking about improvising or playing something on the fly or any of the other phrases I may have thrown around. I definitely don't mean improvising in the sense of, taking a rock or a jazz style lead guitar solo. And a lot of people assume that improvising means making up something completely new that they've never played before. That can be, but often it isn't. And what I mean is playing without planning out every exact note, just introducing variations and sort of deciding on those at the last minute. You can have a roadmap in your mind, and you can even have practiced the ideas that you're going to use. For example, you could know that you want to play the introduction using a 3/4 time picking pattern over G, C, and D. And you could plan to use a tag ending. At the same time, you can keep things a little more open-ended than having every note written out, every little phrase and every nuance of a thing designed ahead of time. As long as you just have that goal in mind, you can work towards that, and you can improvise it because you don't have it written out in front of you and you're not locked on to a sheet of paper trying to play an exact arrangement. I actually find it easier to keep things a little bit loose. It's really easy to get thrown off if you make a mistake when you're trying to play something exactly the same way every time. Oops, I missed a grace note. Now I'm totally lost. What's going on? If you just know the goal and you pick different ways to get there, then there aren't as many mistakes to make. Let me give you an example of how this might go. Suppose I decide as an intro, rather than saying I want to just do the 1, 4, and a 5 chord, let's say I just know that I want to start on a G and I want to end on a D to set up the tune so that I'm ending on the 5 chord. I could play G, C, D. I could change the character of those chords a little bit. I could play. Or I could even take a detour and play some different chords. Let me play, well, I'll just try something on the fly here. So that's just playing chords in the key of G. I've already forgotten what I did, but I believe I played a G down to an E minor. I played an A minor to a C, and then it didn't quite feel like it was going where I wanted it to go. So I started over and played the G down to E minor again, A minor, and then D. So I just took a circuitous route. I knew I was here, I wanted to get here, and I just played different chords in the key, playing a pattern with the goal of getting to the destination of that D chord to set up the beginning of the song. So that's the idea as far as the whole thing with improvising. So I hope this gives you some idea of what my book is about and how I use it myself. This book is available at Amazon.com, and I've also recorded all the hymns using the same kind of approach we've been discussing, playing them both as written with some variations, and when I recorded them, I improvised everything that wasn't the parts that were written. You can download those recordings for free. You can listen to them, or you can download them, whichever you'd like, at the URL listed below. So I had a lot of fun arranging these 25 hymns. These are songs that I grew up hearing and singing in church. Many of them date from the 1800s, and they're still around today. So they're classics that have stood the test of time. They should be quite familiar, I think, to most people. I hope you enjoy playing them and using the book as a guide to your own variations and to your own performances. Let me just go out with a little snippet of another tune from the book.